happened?
Well, what was
What
that?
happened?
I was sounded. I was like, wow, this is really going to get intense, and I like it actually. I think we need to figure out what that was because I loved it. It was really. So here's the deal. Good morning. This is Playing to Win with Mark Henderson Leary and my good friend Brett Freyer. Good morning.
How are you, buddy?
I'm fantastic. This is episode 24 for us. We've been doing this for almost half a year, and at the same time, this is our inaugural episode streaming to LinkedIn Live. I feel like we've been on the island in the crashed plane, and we've been trying to get the radio to work for half a year, and suddenly it's like, hello, we can hear you. Although I say that, and I see the streamers, and I don't see LinkedIn in the stream right now, so maybe it's not streaming yet.
We're gonna find out. Yeah,
we're gonna find out.
Maybe we're still building the help sign out of sticks on the beach. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it says checked up here on the right on the live side. Maybe that doesn't give us the same feedback into the streamers. I don't know. It's experimentation. So how are you, man?
I'm good, man. Yourself?
Fantastic. Feeling great. Had a good weekend. Good weekend. Very engaged. Yeah, so with the 3-year-old, I've determined that there's a nap both Saturday and Sunday. So that divides the weekend into 4 quadrants. And so I have a new strategy, which is basically fill 4 spots of interesting experiences. And so it's changed the planning. And so just one thing per spot, and try to get to 4. And if you get 3 because something doesn't quite work out, you had 3. So it was great.
Nice. So you filled up all 4? Or did you only get 3 this weekend? Okay.
No, we got 4, and actually, a good example of the dynamic was that we the aquarium downtown, which I want to say this. So there was a shooting there last week, and I was thinking that would reduce the attendance. Not the case. Not the case at all. Packed.
Yeah.
So
everybody's brought their own gun just to. just for ground cover.
So we went and all day wristband kind of thing. So to the point where we did that in the morning, maxed it out, and then went home, took a nap, and came back. Did the full
doubled up
half
the quad.
Absolutely. Yeah. Parking, only paid once for parking. They give you a receipt, just like in and out privilege, just like the club. If they stamp you can come back in. And so we did that. We maxed it out to the point where my son was just like, I don't know, we've done everything to the point where you're not really in a hurry, like total win. So swimming on Saturday, swimming on Sunday, bike riding that morning. So got out of the house, stayed out of the house. It was great.
Well done. All
right, that's my update.
Yeah, man, we had a 15-year-old daughter birthday party. So yeah, it was her birthday was on Saturday. Her party was on Sunday. 40 teenage girls dancing, karaoke, swimming, having a good time on Sunday. So if I have bags under my eyes, it's because it was a late night last night.
And you had to drink either way all the way through it.
Now, there's something about drinking while you've got 40 children at your house just seems a little bit dicey. So I unfortunately was not able to do that.
That's just a choice, man.
I'll make up for it tonight.
Good for you. That's what you do on a Monday. What else do you do on a Monday?
Mondays are for. God.
Yeah, got to get the week
started. I'm not a
right.
quitter.
No, because you played a
win. What are we going to talk about today?
I don't know, man. You said you had something bacon that you wanted to talk about, and so hopefully it's good. Don't disappoint me and everybody who's listening right now.
Well, I was trying to think about your 4 quadrants and trying to tie it all together, and I'm at a loss for tying it all together. But I had a conversation with a company last week, and the challenge that they were having was nobody spoke the same language when it came to their sales world.
Oh man!
And so
this is a good one. We can do a deep on this one.
I thought this was a good one, and it came up in a sales call last week. And I was talking to a woman, and she was talking about her sales team, and I was asking about coaching and pipeline management and this, that, and the other. And I could tell by the way that she was answering the questions that those items didn't really exist, right? Coaching, yeah. I mean, we coach, whenever deals get down to the 11th hour, we talk about how we're going to bring it across the finish line, and talked about pipeline management. Well, they kind of keep me up to date on where opportunities are, and as we continued talking, what we realized was that she has a team of 7 salespeople. They all have a different process, if you could even call it that, because most salespeople, including myself, back before I got involved in Sandler, my process was, I'll wing it, see how it goes. Every situation's different. I trust myself, whatever. But what she's identified is that she can't help them. She can't coach them. She can't manage the pipeline because everybody's doing something different. And so since everybody's doing something different, there's no common language, there's no common workflow, there's no common steps in the pipeline. And so sales meetings are pointless. Coaching sessions are almost pointless. And she just, she was really, really frustrated with it. And so I found, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, but I found that conversation really interesting. And I don't know why it stuck with me so much.
Well, there's a lot of things that kind of pop out for me. And I know that I've heard it from you. You taught it to me when you were at the front of the classroom and you start the section of the training, which is why have a process? And it sounds so academic, and it's a great module because a lot of people either dismiss the notion of process or take it for granted. And in neither case are you digging in and say, well, why would you have a process? And one of the recent podcasts I recorded, the interview, we were talking about the fact that there's 2 ways to view process. And one is the optimal process to give a wow experience, or if you're the Disney process, the processes that go into that. And it's an amazing restaurant experience you have. It's just mind blowing. And that's great. But we'll start with having any process, a broken process. What happens if you have like the worst process in the world that you start with? You have the ability to measure, and you have the ability to focus, and you have the ability to sort of pick apart all the things that you could work on. And so having even a basic terrible process is a great way to simplify all the things you could be assessing and ask yourself, are the elements of this process working? What do we call these process steps? And what do we call the process in the first place? And just giving something a name can be exceedingly powerful for allowing you to
would the process be a good name?
Could be
Okay.
Now. So once you have more than one, that you run out, you have a problem. But if you our other process, we have the process, follow the process, but there's the other process as well, and there's the process that people don't know about. But common language. So this idea of common language, common process, a lot of things come together. So you talk about sales. And I want to give you the kind of the reins back with this again. But one of the things that's been shocking to me over the last 4.5 years of working with so many companies at the executive team level and having people who are really working well, the business is running, and it's a good company. And I say, all right, what is the revenue number going to be? And somebody says one number and somebody says a totally different number. And you realize that they don't know what they mean by revenue. And so there's sales and revenue and bookings and
bookings and billings
and booking and all this. And suddenly,
and
it took me a while to. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed for these people." And then after like 4.5 years, like, no, you guys are totally normal. It's totally normal. You must decide what sales is. You must decide what revenue is. You must decide what you're measuring. And so, if those are the fundamentals of even healthy companies, healthy enough. Yeah. What other things could you optimize in the process? What's an account? What's a client? What's a lead? What's a sales qualified lead? What's a marketing qualified lead? SQL, MQL. I mean, that's sophisticated stuff. Don't mess with that if you don't need to know what that is. Just figure out what an account is. Just figure out what a lead or an opportunity is.
Yeah. I mean, how from the leader's perspective, how are you expected to lead, coach, hold people accountable, work to improve things, make things more optimal, more effective, more efficient, if you don't have a way of tracking what's working and what's not working? If you've got a even from the leadership perspective, right? If you've got a vision or a goal for the business, but you don't have a game plan for how to get there, and you don't have the steps defined and the approach in place that you can create some accountability and create some conversations around, okay, where are we? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Okay, here's the game plan to get there. Here are the tools we're going to use. Who's accountable to it? When are we going to meet? The cadence, et cetera.
Yeah, like Christy said, Christy gave her a comment right off of LinkedIn, and Christy's great with this sort of stuff. She points out processes, systems, and accountability are her favorite, but that's a great connection. To have a sense of accountability, you've got to have all those things working together.
Yeah, for sure. And so, on the sales front, if
Thank you for that, Christy. By the way, thank you. Got to give a shout out to the first LinkedIn comment live. So that's awesome. You actually totally take that one. I'll send you not a trophy, an imaginary trophy that for being the first, the first LinkedIn comment.
We will expect an acceptance speech.
Yes.
But
I'm threw you off, man. Sorry.
No, it happens all the time. My head's like a lazy Susan. It'll come back around. Yeah, I mean, so coaching, right? How can I help my team if everybody is not speaking the same language? How can we have team meetings if everybody's not talking about opportunities in the same flow? You mentioned taking someone from a suspect to a prospect to qualified to to presentation to negotiation to close to account management, whatever your process is. How can you work with your team if you don't know what the flow is, if you don't have the same vernacular, if you're not, otherwise you spend half your time coaching your team explaining what the hell you mean.
Right. Well, I mean, sit down. If you sit down at a company or a sales rep and you say, like, you assess the situation, you have no background. What are you pulling in? You say, well, do you have documents? Do you have a presentation? Were you prepared? Why are you dressed like that? Do you do this virtually? Do you do this in person? There's no comparison, right? If you were just to drop in hot to a sales call, like just after it happened or in the middle of it or whatever, you would not have any way to know what was normal and what was not. And so where would you start? Where would you start to improve? What are the moments of truth that tend to create those next steps? And how would you, like, is this the fifth time you met with this person? Is that normal? Do you normally meet? Do you close on the first call? You try to get the close. What do you try to do there? What's all the process that works repeatedly?
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because not only is it the common language, but it's the sales template, right? The playbook.
Yeah.
What's supposed to happen first? I know in my world there's usually an initial phone call, 20 to 25 minute phone call just to establish what they're trying to accomplish, to identify if we're even potentially a good fit, right? And that's step one. Step two is, a deep dive, qualifying conversation with the initial contact, and that's going to be 60 to 90 minutes. And then beyond that, if we've uncovered pain, budget, and decision, then what's the next step, right? And so, to your point, if you were dropped into the middle of a sales process, would you know what's already happened and what's going to happen next based on having identified the most optimal way to get through a sales call? The sales templating or creating that playbook so that our team knows, hey, on your first phone call, this is all you need to do, right? You need to just ask these top 5 questions. And whenever they're done, whenever you got those 5 questions and it sounds like there's potentially a fit, then book an appointment. And here's what that next appointment is going to look like so that you can manage those expectations with the prospect. And then after that, then, and so it's knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it is so important. But also from a leadership perspective, how are you going to help your people? If, you think about running being a football coach, and you're standing on the sideline, and it's fourth and goal from the 5. You're down by 5 points. So go ahead score is on the line. But your entire 11-man offensive team, nobody speaks the same language. Right. Nobody has the same process, nobody's reading from the same playbook. So what do? You have to call a timeout, bring everybody over and go, okay, hey, lineman, here's what I need. Center, I need you blocking straight ahead. Guards, I need you okay, receiver, do one of those things, one of those things where you go like this and then running back. I mean, how ineffective would that be if, as a coach of a football team, you had to coach all 11 players individually because there wasn't a common vernacular, there wasn't a playbook that everybody understood and played from? Imagine how ineffective and Imagine how bad you would get your butt kicked every single week if you had to do it that way.
Well, I mean, when a great player trades or somebody is, makes it onto a new team, and it takes them weeks before they're into the groove of the new system. There's a whole new language and a whole bunch of habits.
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
The thing I want to create a contrast though, like if you feel like you want to play NFL ball and you want to win, then you need to be here. If you and everybody, okay, that's a separate show about self-delusion, but so if you really feel like you're killing it and you want to really crush it, then you got to go to that next level. Your process has to be dialed in. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't even know where to start, then don't worry about it. Get started. Get into the because what we find is that, and it just, Brad, I'm sure you can speak to the same thing. How many times I've worked through a sales process, the person I'm working with, like, it's so complicated, it's different every single time. I kind of have to gut feel this thing, and then we pull it apart and say, well, what was the first step? Well, first thing we had to do is, I don't know, qualify if they're a lead or not. If they're somebody, oh, really? Never thought of that as a possible first step. What did you do after that? Well, we asked them some questions and tried to figure out what their needs. Oh, like a needs assessment? Yeah, it's kind of like a needs assessment. And then after that, did you have to figure out what we did? We had to figure out what the solution might look like for them. And did you keep that to yourself? No, we had to go show them what that was and present it to them. Okay. After that, was there like a negotiation phase or something like where they had like, oh, there was. Okay. So as you pull it apart, there's a lot of common ingredients that you can start to see with X-ray vision into the process, and very, very quickly your skill level goes up because you can start to, one step at a time, raise your game. This is the qualification phase. I don't need to give them a proposal. Don't worry about proposals. Worry about how to figure out if we should continue the process with them or not. Okay, now our focus and our ability to have good coaching, to bring it back to your point, is crystal clear because now I know what I'm supposed to be coaching on. And it's all very, very common stuff that everybody has. Now, your depth is different, but the stages are largely the same.
Well, and if we don't know what we're supposed to be doing at any step of the process, then we're likely to default to the prospect. And what does the prospect want? That, They want data, they want pricing, they want proposals, they want good, better, best options, they want Rev 5, they want all these different things. And if we don't know the healthy steps to the process, we're going to acquiesce to their requests. And we might have that first 10 or 15-minute phone call. And the prospect says, look, I'm in a bit of a rush. I just need some pricing. Can you just give me good, better, best options? And if we don't have a process, if we don't have an approach, then what are we going to do? We're likely to say, okay, because we don't know what we're supposed to be doing otherwise.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that sometimes you look at me. I'm like this is from the 70s.
What are you doing?
I'm fixing my hair. I'm fixing my hair. It's a habit. My hair is
Henderson
long.
Leary. Get it together, son.
It's got to change. I don't. The hair thing I've been experimenting with the long hair thing, and I think it just died. But we'll see about the future. Anyway, what was my point before I started primping?
I don't know. That threw me off. That was just horribly distracting.
My head in the lazy. What were we talking about before I started
So
primping?
we talked about acquiescing to the prospect.
Oh yeah, that's it. So I think that you have to, as a salesperson, as a sales leader, and as an entrepreneur, understand that doing what the customer says is not necessarily in their best interest. Just understanding that a skilled or well-seasoned buyer is trying to do one thing by default, and that is play defense. They want to keep themselves in some sense of safety and control. And that is going to decrease your ability to actually have a connected conversation about what they actually need. And so you have to have that process so you can sort of check through, because what I mentioned, like that whole qualification and needs analysis and proposal presentation. Now, if you've got a product, it might be a little bit different, but the idea is it's this funnel of learning, understanding, and solutioning in some capacity. And that's what you need. That has to happen. Like that whole process has to happen. And if you aren't plugged into that process and somebody says, we're just going to get right to the end of this and you just give me the pricing, then you skipped all those steps. They're doing that from a natural emotional reason because they don't trust you. They want their safety. You've metaphorically walked into the Best Buy you're walking in, or they're walking in to buy a TV, and the sales rep says, can I help you? I'm just looking. You're salespeople are liars. You're the buyer. You lied right to that salesperson because you're ready to buy a TV and you didn't even think about the fact that how many times does the buyer in that case think about the fact that they are out of hand lie to any Best Buy rep at any second and literally not even think about it.
Well, because there's a rule that says you can lie to salespeople and still go to heaven. So I think they taught that. They taught that at that camp you went to.
That's a good point. That's a good point on both counts. But I would say, have we verified that you actually can get into heaven or not if you lie to salespeople? Because this is important. There's a lot of people going to be really surprised if a lot.
I'm going for deathbed of repentance.
Okay.
So we're good. Well, and so.
Is that what people confess when they're dead? Oh, I lied to so many Best Buy reps. Oh my God.
I'm so sorry. So to your point, coaching to a process, having a process, not only is it something that prospects they do tend to fabricate, they do tend to lie, and I posted a video on that just recently that all prospects lie all the time, and that's not because they're bad people. It's because, to your point, they're defending themselves against the evil of sales, because they don't want to be manipulated. They don't want to wake up one morning and realize they had this Jedi mind trick pulled on them.
Yeah, well, they might not trust themselves.
You know what? The problem is they go into Best Buy looking for a TV and they walk out with the washer dryer and they're like, what the hell just happened? Where am I? They got sold something they weren't expecting to buy.
It's like 14 channels and speakers. I don't even have a room for this thing. Yeah.
So the other problem is, like I'm coaching a team recently and they've got a BDR team that does the prospecting. And they're an IT company, and the BDRs bring in the leads, hand it off to the AMs, account managers, or the sales executives, and they're the level 2 are the ones that run the sales calls. Well, while the outbounding calls are being made, what the prospects always ask for is, "Yeah, I'd love to see a demo. Yeah, I'd love to see a demo. Yeah, I'd love to see a demo." And so this company continually got sucked into the world of leading with demos.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of leading with qualifications. And when you lead with demos, all sorts of negative things can happen. All sorts of bad things can happen, from prospects just qualifying you based on the demo, even though you didn't know what you should be focusing on in the demo, to prospects looking at it and going, "Oh, this is too nice. This is probably too much for me. I don't want to pay for all that. It's going to be too expensive." There's a lot of things that can happen if we lead with presentations before we qualify. And so, if you don't have a process, if everybody's not speaking the same language, how do you get to that root cause of what's propelling all of those opportunities to fall into the disqualified bucket, right? If everybody's not speaking the same language, if everybody's not following the same process, it's difficult to backtrack and go, okay, well, hold on a second. We've done 25 demos and we've only had one close. What's going on?
Yeah. Right.
Why is this a problem? Well, let's backtrack out.
And if you look at the last 4 sales processes and they're not the same as each other, you have nothing to work with.
Right. Yeah, because here's the problem, right? When things go good, without a process, when things go good, who do people give credit to?
The sales rep.
Right. They give it to themselves. I'm amazing. That's why you hired me. That's why you pay me the big bucks, because I make things happen. Yeah. Don't know how, but I make things happen.
I saw the opportunity. I took the shot, and look at what I got.
I took the shot. Give me the ball, coach. But when things go bad, when they don't go as planned, when they fall apart, whose fault is it?
Stupid customer just doesn't
freaking
know.
Prospect. They had no idiots.
They're going to regret that. They're going to call us back.
They're going to be back in 6 months. That's right.
After that 3-year contract they signed, it goes so badly for them that they're going to call us in 37 months. So grateful to have us back.
They'll ruin the day. Yeah. So without process, without an approach, we give ourselves all the credit for being amazing, but yet we shoulder none of the blame when things derail. We blame it on the other person because we really don't know what went wrong.
Yeah.
and we can't assume responsibility because we did the exact same thing we always do, which is nothing. Uh, you just played along, followed the bouncing ball.
Well, that brings me up.
And we've been there. I've been there.
Yeah. I did some selling years ago with Friends Company, and it was a kind of a channel-oriented company, meaning we were an agent, authorized reseller of some high-end products, which meant we frequently brought in the vendor, the manufacturer. And manufacturers, in my experience, not all, but many, sell, especially when it's a major nameplate manufacturer, they sell on reputation and confidence. And we're the manufacturer, and I can answer any question authoritatively. I can change the product for you if I need to. And so they're terrible on technique, just horrible. And so the person responsible for selling this, in this case, was me. And what I had a process, and I had a way of doing this, and I had to ask and get them to answer some questions, and it was just a disaster because we would get the call going and the manufacturer would be on and they wouldn't be plugged in. They weren't up for pre-call planning. We couldn't get on the same page because they could just only schedule the time for the call. And it was just always a goat rodeo trying to figure out what the objective of the call was. I'm trying to really dig deep into pain. The manufacturer's just assuming they're going to buy and assuming that if I'm going to ask a question, like it's say a negative or reverse, or like, why would you do this deal? Or why wouldn't you get less? Why would you, and they're like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
So it was very, very difficult to not have that process. And I've seen that inside companies as well. It's tough when you have like an outside third party, and you can overcome it if you understand how that works. But it's ridiculous. It's sad when you're inside your organization and you're not on the same page with. This is the part of the process where we deal with uncertainty. Because I know I'm kind of jumping around a bunch of subjects here, but
no, I think you're tying it in nicely because we only got 3 minutes left, so it's perfect. Perfect tie back. Yeah.
So what we know about excellence in selling and leadership is that it's about encountering the uncertainty, asking questions, not knowing what the answer is going to be. And the best selling comes from that. The best leadership comes from that. You not assuming, asking questions, and 20% is you talking, asking good questions, and 80% listening. That's part of the sales process. That's part of leadership. That's part of management, for that matter. And so, if you have a part of the process that's supposed to be listening, but you got somebody jumping in and they're doing all the talking, you're ruining the opportunity to learn what's going on. You got to have that process so everybody knows today's the day we shut up. Okay, everybody shut up in this meeting, okay? We got to write and listen and don't show off. I'll kick you out of the meeting. And so that's an important part of that. And this is all kind of tying back to the process. The last thing I want to add to the criticality of process, and I'm going to totally jump out and let you tie this all together, is that if you have a very expensive sales process, say you're the leader, you're the entrepreneur, you're the visionary, and you're like, I can't be in the process. It's not a binary thing. You may need to be in a little sliver of the process, and you got to figure out when that's going to be, and you got to decide when that high value piece is, and like you were talking about the BDRs and the AMs in the process. And there's probably a principal in there who either inks the deal or at the beginning they could have blessed the deal or somewhere show up. Figure out the right price and the right amount for that. And that's my last thing on process. Really good topic, Brad. Bring us home, man.
No, man. So at the end of the day, you look at the organizations that have had the most success, and it's not because of individuals; it's because of their way. I think about the Patriot way. Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft have a process, and although they struggled this past year, I believe they will show again that their process, their methods work, and so every company needs to have their way. You need to have process. You need to have methodology so that you're not reliant on a person or gut feel to succeed. So make sure that you have a common approach, a common methodology. You can coach and speak the language and have a way of doing things so that you can identify what's working and what's not working and fix it.
Absolutely. Great stuff, man. I love the topic. We can talk about it ad nauseum, in fact, which would make you nauseous, which is what that means, actually. It's too much is there's another way of saying that. But awesome topic. We will see you next time on Play and Win with me, Mark, and my good friend, Brad. See you, brother.
Have a good week.